Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a welcome to Media Watch. My name is Bob Lofgren. Here we talk about the events that are basically events that have been going on and how the media is treating them, which is always interesting these days because there's very partisan. They want to talk about partisanship in the government. Partisanship in the media is it's almost that's not the news. It's not Walter Cronkite anymore, or John Cameron Swayze, people like that. We're very even about the news. Now they got when something happens to Donald Trump, all of a sudden it's on CNN. It's an hour show. Whereas if it's on Fox, and I'm not going to defend Fox for this kind of thing, they're very partisan too. The problem is, of course, that there are many more viewers in Fox News, in the Fox networks, than there is in CNN and MSNBC and a few other things. Well, those two for sure combined, they have a much bigger audience. At any rate, that's kind of what we talk about. My co-host, Rob Sumner, right? Rob Raffelli. Rob Sumner is not with us anymore. Rob Raffelli, who would do this virtual. One of the modern things of our time now, we can have meetings and so on across the country, discussions like we're having right now, without the people being in the same room together. At any rate,
in fact, we prefer not.
I'll let you start it off, Rob.
Sure. Some of the things that I'd like to talk about reflect on the relationship between media and government. To me, it seems like the media wants to be the government. The government wants the media to do things that help them. And specifically, look, I'll bash on the Republicans as soon as it's their turn. But
Yeah.
right now, we have a Democrat in the White House, and we have media who have been voting heavily Democrat for quite a while.
Yeah.
And they seem to want to do things together. But the latest is that, like the White House has wanted the president criticized less, and people in the White House have literally called media giants and asked them to tone down
Right.
the amount of anti-Joe Biden comments.
Yeah.
I thought, if the government did that, if the government reduced your ability to speak, let's say against Joe Biden,
Yeah.
then the government would be breaching the First Amendment. And something you got to think about here is that when the government achieves an impermissible purpose by having somebody else do it, it's got to be just as bad as it's not right to murder somebody, but they hired a hitman instead. It's like, they're not guilty.
Yeah.
No, they're guilty of violating the First Amendment. And I'm sure that at some future date, if our civilization holds together...
Can you really violate the First Amendment, though? That's the whole idea. Free speech is free speech. You get to do things. I mean, if they want to badmouth Trump or even brag about what Biden's doing, but that's up to them. That's why you have different media.
What I'm getting at there is that they're trying to make Google and Facebook and Instagram and others be their arm. It's supposed to be a place where people can just do their talking and express themselves.
Right.
And the government is literally calling these companies and saying, I'm hearing altogether too much out of Joe Rogan. We'd like him to be quieter. We don't want to hear so much out of, and they have a list of people they don't want to hear from. And they're asking them to reduce their reach, asking them to shadow ban them, asking them to demonetize them, which is, they were getting paid by advertisers for clicks on a page that their stuff was on.
For the number of people that are watching, the number of eyeballs, basically.
But now they say, well, we want that demonetized. We don't want them to be able to make money. So they're actually willing to hurt somebody whose viewpoint they don't like by reducing their livelihood.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, that's like trying to starve you. Oh, we didn't shoot him. We just didn't feed him.
Well,
Anyway,
there's a little difference though between like newspapers, and of course that was before. And I always like to say it was William Randolph Hearst who owned like 30 or 40 newspapers, and big newspapers across the country. And he huge, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and so on and so forth. I think he owned anything in the Los Angeles area. At any rate, that's different. And then of course television, radio, and then of course television, and the internet has introduced a whole new spectrum of comment. As you said, they have free speech. People say things on the internet that are very provocative, and in fact slanderous, and maybe even are calling for violence, basically, and it's 1,000 of them. However, as I always say, there's free speech. You have the right of free speech, and you have the right to listen to free speech. I don't go on TikTok. I've never been on it, never going to be on it, basically, or Instagram, or all these different social media situations. I mean, and I don't think a lot of stuff that I follow on Facebook has nothing to do with politics. Basically, the people that I know, although I'm sure a lot of them are very liberal people and so on, progressives or whatever you want to call them and so on. But the media really has always been. I fix my hat here. Let me get that off over here. Can't do it. Anyway, let's keep in mind that the media, in the very beginning of our democracy, our government in the late 18th century, was a very the first two presidents, Washington D.C. I don't know if there was even an election for George Washington being elected. His first term, at least. He was just sort of anointed. He was the president, and then he ran again in '92, and he became had 2 terms. He retired. He quit in '96. Luckily, he died within the next 4 years. But that was a contested election. John Adams was against Jefferson. I think in those days they were, but there weren't parties. They were just personalities at that point. But come 1800, Jefferson, now there was a party, the Democratic Republican Party. That's what they called themselves, and that's what now which became the Democratic Party. At least that's what they say. At any rate, they both had their own newspapers in Philadelphia. This is where the government was maybe it was New York. Anyway, this is where they had their own newspapers throughout the colonies that they could distribute and so on, and they decided what was in the newspaper. Like Wendy McCaw's not getting a lot of crap because all the reporters who were supposed to be, she was not supposed to talk about it and so on. Bullshit. She owned the newspaper. She could demand what it was going to print and what it was not going to print. That's the whole idea. They talk about excuse my language. They talk about this. They should be nonpartisan or something like that and so on. It has never been and it never will be. You have an opinion. That's what it is when you get on. But it's more so, of course, these days and that.
In the nonpartisan realm, I kind of favor a devotion to truth. I know there are going to be differing opinions about which truths are important or how to view a situation, but I'd like people to at least be trying to make sure that the things that they say aren't lies. That let's say you say that somebody hit somebody. It would be nice if we had some good way of something reliable, like reliable witnesses said so.
Yeah.
And he also came over and he showed me the bruise on his cheek. I mean, a little something where I can feel like it when they reported, I said, yeah, he got hit in the cheek, probably by that guy they said. But anyway, I'd like some kind of devotion to the truth. Feel free to add your slant. I always tell people, look, I have an opinion about this, and I can tell you what it is and why, but I'd like to try to at least establish some facts so that we know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the problem is with that, you say that they don't lie, but quite honestly, the people that tell a lie actually believe it's not a lie. That it is the truth. When they talk about Donald Trump, all of his personality defaults and so on, they really believe all of that stuff. You know, and that they're sincere about it and so on. They believe their own lies, and it's the same old thing as the truth. What is the truth? Well, I'll tell you what the truth is. In my definition, it's a bunch of facts that you have laid out, which describe a truth. But I was at a party one time, long time ago. I was the one that went to UCR, and a philosophy guy, a graduate student at Riverside, University of California, Riverside, we're talking about the philosophy and the truth. He says, well, it's like a bed, and you put these facts on the bed, and now that's the truth. But then along comes some other facts. They don't fit the bed. Well, okay, we'll just cut those off. And that's what they do all the time. There's always a different side to the story. And again, I say that you don't have to listen to it either. You know, the freedom to speak also is the same thing. Essentially, is I don't have to listen to it. You turn it off. You don't want to turn it. You don't want to hear any more of that stuff because you don't think it's the truth. You don't think it's the truth, or it's a fact, or even a fact for that matter. I can go through a whole list of stuff like that about the Civil War, about the guys that were. The statues they're all tearing down in the South now, but these Civil War people. I think I've told this story before, but I'm not going to do it again. There's a statue in Washington, D.C. of a general who was in the Civil War, fought battles and so on, who was born in the South. Now this is in Washington, D.C. It's the Thomas Circle, in fact. He's the general. And they have a statue for him. He's got the sword and the horse and the whole banana, right? In fact, the street is named after him. Besides, he was a Union general during the war, and he was no, that's right. I made a mistake. He wasn't a Union general. Yes, right. Yeah, he was a Union general. I'm sorry, I get mixed up. I screwed up the story already. The bottom line is he was born in Virginia. On a plantation, suffered through and was almost killed in the riot or the rebellion that the black slaves did at about the 1830s. I can't remember, Nate something or other. And
Turner?
Yeah, that Turner, right. He had the family had to run into the forest or whatever it was to hide out because they were after him and so on. He went to West Point. He did. Robert A. Lee was the commandant of the school, and Longfellow, Confederate generals. What's his name? Stonewall Jackson. He went to a different place. He didn't go to West Point, but all the generals are there. So at the beginning of the Civil War, these had to make a decision what they were going to do. Robert E. Lee, of course, decided that it was more important to be for his state than it was for the Confederacy. So that's what he fought for, the Confederacy, because Virginia was one of the states that has seceded from the Union.
Yes, Lee was a Virginian.
I'm sorry?
Lee was a Virginian.
Yeah, he was a Virginian, right. His state was more important than the country as far as that. He was more loyal to the state than he was to the country. And keep that in mind.
There was some reluctance. He really felt that the rebellion was a mistake. He had his own somewhat long-term plan for getting rid of slavery himself. But when Virginia seceded, he said, well, I'm a Virginian.
Actually, Robert E. Lee never actually owned slaves. His wife did, but he never owned slaves. Legally, I guess, in a sense, and so on. Whereas Thomas, they call him the Rock of Chickamauga. He fought a battle there that he was very, he basically saved the day. I don't know if it was that wasn't Antietam, it was someplace else, but it was in the Western theater of the war, not the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac and all that, and where a lot of war was what you would think of the Civil War as being fought basically in Maryland and Virginia and one in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, of course, and so on. At any rate, he was a hero, like I say, he was. They put a statue up to him. Well, he was a Confederate. No, he wasn't a Confederate. He was a Union general. He decided to go with the Union rather than go with his state, which was, of course, also Virginia. Besides, and in fact, a lot of so when the war started, the Confederacy really had the officer corps that the Union troops did not have. Almost invariably, a lot of those guys went with the Confederate, but of course that wasn't good enough for the war, how the war went. But there's a simple fact. They want to cut down all the statues and all the rocks and all the memorials to the Confederate generals and so on, without really knowing what the situation was. If this show is nothing else, it's a history show. It's a lot of history that goes into all of these things. They're not quite as simple as you think they might be.
Actually, what this stuff reminds me of with the statues going is, it's like the communists. It's a purge. You're not going to look up at that guy. You're not going to see that statue. After all, we could put a sign there that says, there are these unlovely things about this guy. No, they're going to become an unperson. They will. It's like they never existed except to be spat upon.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to do a segue, if I may,
sure,
into a situation where we have a couple of people who are saying things that powerful folks don't like, and there are efforts to get them off the internet. And so what I'd like to do is bring up, I have a picture. It's basically all blue with a bit of writing that I'm going to read to you because it's about Russell Brand, and it's also about Tim Ballard. These guys are kind of known in the media currently, and they're also, both of them are accused of sexual misconduct. Anyway, so that's why I'm saying it. Sexual misconduct allegations, isn't that convenient? Russell Brand speaks out about wars, about banks, and about big pharma. And Tim Ballard is the real-life hero of Sound of Freedom, which is a hit movie about child sex trafficking. And by the way, that's a hit movie where Hollywood and media didn't want it to be a hit movie. They were essentially saying nothing about it and trying not to review it, and it basically word of mouth on the internet got a very good reception. It's done quite well. So I look at stuff like that and I find myself thinking, who needs to say, oh, here's some hero who has done a lot about child sex trafficking. We ought to find some dirt on him and see if we can get him off the internet. And for that matter, Russell Brand, he's being accused of, for those of us who don't want to say the R word, he's being accused of, let's say, being inappropriate with women and also what we might call the snuggle struggle. Anyway, this is stuff that he was big, first of all, on regular TV, like 20 years ago. He was on Big Brother and all sorts of stuff, and he was wildly promiscuous, and everybody knew it, and it was part of his TV personality. And it turns out recently he's been talking about how he thought maybe not everything about the current vaccines were the greatest idea. He's been talking about how banks participate in debasing currencies, and he talks about how defense contractors seem to love to have wars. Anyway, now that he's really inconvenient to the establishment, we have media companies basically doing the establishment's bidding. What do? They say, why don't you go out and see if you can find some ex-girlfriends who don't like Russell Brand and are willing to accuse him.
Yeah.
And as near as I can tell,
and also they add, and by the way, there's some money involved here too.
Oh yeah, there's some money
involved. We'll sue him for a couple of million. What do you think? Whoa, yeah, sure.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the thing is, there were no accusations at the time. There were no
right.
The police were never involved. The police are still not involved. Yeah. And I'm looking at this and saying, wait a second, you're all over the internet and TV about the bad things this guy did, which would be crimes, but you haven't gone to the police. Well, the police would have to investigate. They would have to gather evidence. And I suspect there is embarrassingly little. The great thing about sex misconduct allegations is it's not like somebody says, well, he cut my hand off. You say, which one? And get them to hold their arms up at least. But it's somebody, so you would know that something had happened. But
Right.
if someone says, oh, so-and-so 25 years ago touched me inappropriately,
Yeah.
I can't prove that, I can't disprove it. It could have happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, it it seems like the least provable stuff seems to be the stuff that's brought up the most often when they want to hurt someone or deplatform them.
Yeah. And that's bringing that up. Of course, Donald Trump is accused of molesting this woman in a dressing room at a major department store.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. And 15 years later, 20 years later, she goes after him and wins, I guess. They came through and so, with no other evidence of it. She never reported it and stuff like that. But how do you even do that in a dressing room in a department store with people all over the place and so on? All she had to do was yell, and that would have been the end of that. Quick. But of course, he was a rich, probably a good-looking guy and a rich guy and so on, and maybe something a little grab in here or there and so on was going on. And then of course, later on, I think she won in this lawsuit recently, $17 million or some ungodly number and so on.
I didn't even follow
I hate to tell you this, but there's some flaws in that. There's some idea. Of course, as I say, the jury went against him.
Yeah. My point is not that it didn't happen. I don't know if it happened.
Yeah.
And you don't know if it happened.
Right.
But my point is just that it's something where we can't know if it happened, except that somebody's going to do a very good job of emoting, and some attorney is going to paint a horrible picture.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you don't know. And of course, everybody likes to be sympathetic. You think someone sounds like a victim. I'd like to be sympathetic to victims. I don't want bad people getting away with bad deeds. But long story short, you don't know. And it's bizarre to act like you do know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strange business. Anyway, I forgot what subject we started out on here and so on. But
yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about Russell Brand and and Tim Ballard being accused, and the evidence is pretty scant. There was some guy from that '70s show, guy who played Hyde. I don't remember the actor's name offhand, but he has been accused of rape recently, and I think he's been sentenced to something like 20 years for something that allegedly happened, more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that people should get away with crimes just because it was a while ago. Right. But I am saying, what the heck kind of evidence did they have? I don't think they had any evidence except someone tells a story. Yeah. I look and I say, I get you, and if it happened, that's horrible. But all I've got so far is a story. Yeah. So when you want to convict people and send them away for 20 years, I'd like to have a little more. Yeah. I would have a hard time putting somebody in the slam for a story.
It come up. I'll change the subject now. Say that the governor of our state, the Frenchy Newsom, as I call him, decided that he was going to try to get a constitutional convention to get this gun control amendment, I guess, for our Constitution to. Get it rolling as far as in a federal law. He did, in fact, as I told you before the show started, it really mimics what, in fact, the control is in the state of California, gun control and that and so on. So it's not going to be implemented here because it already exists and so on. And there's still killings, people going into dance clubs and so on in Alhambra and shooting people and so on. That was I'll say a great story, but it was the guy went to one place and shot a bunch of people, and then he went to another one. But the guy that was at the door grabbed the gun when he grabbed the guy and caught him, of course, and he didn't end up killing anybody in that one. He defended himself, basically. Defended he wasn't really in that job, but that's what he did. And maybe that should be happening about people carry guns. Anyway. He wants to have a constitutional convention to change the law to amend the Constitution, essentially, and so on. Unfortunately, when you have a constitutional convention, now you can change the entire Constitution. You can do whatever you want to do, and so on. And it would be a risk. You might want to put an amendment in, and it would have to be the approval rate, because all the states, you have to have a majority In fact, I think more than that, even maybe majority of the states to say that this is okay. This will be an amendment to the Constitution. And let's face it, there are a lot more Republican states that vote Republican than there are Democratic states. It's a process that the Constitution itself identifies as says what the process is and so on. It isn't just a majority of everybody and voting on it. Like you have an election or something like that, and more people vote for or against it, and that kind of thing. It's a process. But the bottom line is, while you're at it, you change a lot of things to the Constitution at the same time.
All right, let me say a little something about the Constitutional Convention. This is going to be a quickie review of the structure of the Constitution itself.
Yeah.
I forget how many articles there are, maybe about 7. But the Constitution is very simply organized. Article 1 is about Congress. Article 2 is about the presidency. Article 3 is about the Supreme Court. Article 4 is about the states. And Article 5 is about amending. I think treaties may also be in Article 5. But anyway,
yeah.
we have the regular amendment process where it's proposed in Congress and then goes around to be ratified in state legislatures.
Yeah.
And we also have, it also provides for something we have never done, and that is hold a convention of the states to amend the Constitution. And people refer to this generally as an Article 5 convention. I've known some very nice people who were highly motivated to do things that I like, but they were calling for an Article 5 convention. And that gives me the shivers, because as you were saying, once you're at the Article 5 convention, they could rewrite it entirely. They could do anything.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
there's no agenda that the states are required
Right.
to stick with.
Yeah.
And if that's not the case, I don't trust them.
Yeah.
I'm really trust challenged at this point. So
politicians, Republicans or Democrats, I don't. It's tough to say. Okay, what they want things too. Republicans want things just like the Democrats want, and of course, if you have a majority and so on, and they go through the process. But there is a process, of course, as you just said. There's a process for amending the Constitution, and it has been done. I like to point out, for example, that that's how the women got right to vote. It took a long process to get it done, but in fact it did get done. In the 1920 election was the first election where women had the right to vote, and also prohibition. It was an amendment to the Constitution that outlawed alcohol, and that was an amendment to the Constitution. 12 years later, 13 years later, Roosevelt comes in and he wanted to get rid of that amendment. You had to amend the Constitution. One amendment was for it, the next amendment was against it, wiped it clean. But they're both in the Constitution today as amendments to the Constitution.
I want to say something about prohibition, because prohibition is a magnificent illustration of something. I find it's interesting that I don't see people saying to themselves, well, government can't do this or that. But at the time of Prohibition, Congress recognized that even if they wanted to outlaw alcohol, that the Constitution did not grant them the power to outlaw alcohol. And that is why they did the constitutional amendment. They said, well, the Constitution doesn't grant us that power, but after the amendment, it does. So I thought, how amazing. They wanted to fight a drug war against alcohol, and they knew that they lacked the power. It was refreshingly honest.
Yeah, it's the process is there. Well, the bottom line is there never will be a constitutional convention because they just won't agree what the agenda is going to be and so on. But I thank God it's not. It might end up being a document. I think is it printed on one sheet of paper, something like that, isn't it? The Constitution is under glass someplace in Philadelphia or someplace that.
I would think that it would run to maybe 3 to 5, maybe more.
Yeah.
But I guess it depends on how tiny you write.
Well, it won't end up being 2,800 pages, which we haven't read yet.
Oh yeah.
We'll pass it and then we'll read it.
Why don't we
Pelosi's famous statement.
Yeah, Pelosi. We have to pass it in order to find out what's in it.
Yeah.
So our director was kind enough to preview our next one, which is, I think of it as, it's picture number 120. It's the CNN experts versus the Constitution. Because CNN hates the Constitution. There's Jim Acosta, who will, on the
outdated,
left side. Jim Acosta, of course, hates Trump, and I'm going to guess the other two do as well. But these are scholars, and they're warning that the outdated Constitution has put democracy at risk.
Yeah.
And I don't know what democracy they're talking about, but this is why I've written in the white letters at the top, democracy, bah. The Constitution was drafted to preserve liberty. CNN and their dark masters get these degreed guys to defame the Constitution. Oh, what? I'll tell you, here's a word that doesn't occur in the Constitution: democracy.
Yeah.
Because it is. See, I would support a president. I would support druids. I would support the king, whatever, if it secured our rights. See,
right.
To me, democracy and republic and any of that stuff, that is superfluous. I want something that secures our rights. I'll take fairies dancing on the head of a pin if they secure our rights.
Yeah.
Because that's what I want. I want a government that secures the rights that define a free society.
Yeah, keep in mind the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, was written after the Constitution was adopted, basically.
Not exactly.
Well, not exactly, but it was an afterthought that they said they already had to do it.
Yeah,
it wasn't part of the original Constitution.
That states said that they would not ratify without it.
Well, some states did. Some states had already done it, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you wanted enough states, you had to do it.
But did they really have the actual Bill of Rights? I mean, the first 10 amendments written out, or would they just say we want a Bill of Rights?
There was a process, but actually there were 12, and 2 of them were not adopted, and 10 of them were.
Yeah. But anyway, that brings up the whole democracy, republic, and so on and so forth. We were an experiment. When this government was formed, the British had certain things that they could do, and they had a parliament for the king. But of course, that was all a bunch of people, property owners. To get the vote, you had to own property in those days to be part of the government. Most of the people were left out of it. But our thing was, everybody gets a right to vote. Of course, not the black people. That was the 3/5 amendment, or 3/5 part of the Constitution, and so on. That's a whole different story, in fact.
Actually,
but eventually, it was cured, and black people did get the right to vote.
Mm-hmm. But 3/5 was not as bad as people think, because that was to keep the slave states from counting the blacks fully and having a stranglehold on legislation. It actually made making things more liberal and going toward freedom. It made that possible.
Yeah, and of course they didn't have the right to vote even. But to be counted as people.
Just counted.
But that kind of people didn't have the right to vote.
No, but they wanted to
But that was of course changed too over the years. But like I'd like to say, democracy and republic, all these commentators talk about there's a threat to democracy, republic is going to happen, and so on. There always will be that. The idea of a government of the people, by the people, for the people, who cares about the people, let's make them happy, the people, and all that stuff and so on. This is an experiment, and in this experiment still going on. Things have changed. The social media, all kinds of different things and so on that are happening. Things change. Media changes. Instantaneous media, and people have a right to go on these different social media platforms and all that. And in many ways, it's changed. For example, I bet if you ask people on the street if our government had established a two-party system. No, didn't it? There is no such thing as a two-party system. You'll go to France, Israel, England, places like that. There have been other parties that have been part of it, and even to this day. And they do decide elections. They decided Bush's first election. They decided Teddy Roosevelt's election in 1912, not Woodrow Wilson's election in 1912.
Right.
Abraham Lincoln. It was four different parties ran and Lincoln, and they had a right to vote. The southern states were still in the Union. They had a right to do that, but he won that election with a very low. He certainly didn't get a majority, but he had the electoral vote in it and so on. Right. And that has been changed too. We've gone from another thing. We've gone from is from conventions prior to Lincoln, and even after that. In fact, there was the party within the state by that time was Republicans and Democrats, but again, other parties were involved. And even within the party, there were factions of different places. A Republican in California is not the same as a Republican in, say, Iowa or some of the other states. For example, John Kennedy won in 1960. He won the South because he was a Democrat, and all the southern states voted Democratic. That was what they did. Now, of course, that's changed. Now most of the senators are Republicans now. It's a thing in process. I always like to say, but let me get this finished up here. You talk about revolutions. That's what usually happens. And there are four that are really the dominant ones. They go on all the time and all over the world, and so there's coup d'etats and things like that and so on. But there are four that we know about: is the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, and the Russian Revolution. So let's start with the American Revolution. Well, let's get back to that, okay? You go to the French Revolution. After they got done chopping off heads, they ended up with Napoleon, who declared himself the Emperor of France. Mm-hmm. And maybe it didn't work out quite so well. Of course, it's gotten better since then. Then we go to the Mexican Revolution. I don't think people know that there were more people killed in the Mexican Revolution in 1910, 1912, in that area, than there were in all the other revolutions combined. And in fact, the president, the sitting president, or there was a sitting president in Mexico from the beginning in 1912 to all the way up to about 1930, was assassinated. Assassination was part of the government. It was part of the political process. And in fact, it still is in many places, in governments and so on. So then we get back to the American Revolution. Well, we're still working on it. It isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. And in fact, when you lose the election, then you say, well, we got to change this, we got to change that. But of course, you win the next election, well, everything's fine now. Everything's okay. Now we like it and so that.
Quote from JFK that's apropos of that. JFK said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable."
Right, exactly. We were really the only elections that were against another government, and we were against the British, and they were, of course, far away, the king and so on. Whereas the revolutions, all the other revolutions, were in-house essentially, against the existing government that was ruling them. In Mexico, for example, that had been an independent country for many years, but the guy that took over kicked him out. In fact, he escaped. he ran to the nearest port and ended up in Spain for the rest of his life, and that. Trotsky, of course, he tried to get. Well, in France, of course, they just killed off a bunch of royalty and so on. It didn't get him anywhere. It ended up being Napoleon, who wanted to rule the world, and of course he did the invasion of Russia, and that pretty much ended that. Took a while after that even, but that pretty much ended his situation. Ended up on a little island off the coast of Africa, and that's where he died. Anyway, we only have a few minutes left here. Go ahead. What else you want to talk about?
I'd like to just bump on to the next one, which is the Rob Reiner statement. I'm on Twitter these days, and I don't post a lot, but I find all sorts of interesting things. And
Okay.
Rob Reiner, he's the famous producer, very funny man, very talented. He was Meathead in All in the Family. But anyway, I'd love to show that one if I can, because what Reiner had to say basically was, he thought that to save our democracy, yes, here's Reiner in black saying, hard reality, for our democracy to survive, two things have to happen. Donald Trump needs to be convicted for January 6th, and there can be no third-party candidate.
Yeah.
In other words, look, first of all, he's clearly stating that Donald Trump would win if he wasn't in jail. And he also realizes that even if it weren't Donald Trump, if there were a third-party candidate who drew any votes away from Biden, that the Democrats would still lose. So what his idea is, imprison the likely winner, Trump. Ban all other contenders, third parties, which is why I asked, do Democrats hate democracy?
Well, number one, Donald Trump may be convicted, and he may have go to prison and so on, but he also may have been elected. Keep in mind, Eugene V. Debs in 1920, he was in jail. He was a socialist. He wasn't one of the main contenders. He wasn't a Republican Democrat, although he believed he was a pretty good progressive. But he got 6 million votes. No, he got 6% of the voters in that election, and he was in jail for not supporting the war and that sort of thing and so on. I guess he did get released eventually. At any rate, he was in jail, so it may very well be that a person who gets convicted of some crime and goes through it, that has not been established yet, and that may be adjudicated too. And the other side of it is third party, as I've always said. That's what is the name was? What the guy with you just quoted? I forgot. Who was it you just quoted?
I quoted JFK.
The guy that you just read on the screen.
Oh, Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner. And that gets me too. You know, movie stars, celebrities, and so on, like that, and so on. What kind of expertise do they have? They're getting paid big money to make movies, to be entertainers and that sort of thing and so on. Does that give them some kind of say over what they, some kind of expertise in politics and so on? No, it doesn't. They're listened to because, of course, they're famous. And he says that, and you know, it always gets me that they think that they actually are, they have the answers. But it's not scripted. But they can't make it into a movie or something like that. You know, all of a sudden, they're the experts and so on in situations. They're the royalty of our system, movie stars.
Yeah,
and they used to be. Who
does he think he is?
And they used to be. They looked upon anybody in that business and so on looked upon as being evil, really. In the movie, any kind of thing in show business and that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying, thank you. I'm saying, what I'm asking of Rob Reiner, who does he think he is? Rosie O'Donnell?
Yeah, right, there you go. good example of it.
Or Barbara Streisand? I mean, really.
Yeah, right.
Now, I'd love to skip ahead for just a cultural picture. I want to go up to our Victoria's Secret one. That'd be picture 230, because Victoria's Secret, the stock, has not been doing too well lately, and I think that we may see the reason why in an ad that they like to show. There it is. This is you know, they used to do these hot glamour lingerie ads.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
it still is. It's just that it's the models that they get you a little excited. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say here. Oh, first of all, the first one all the way on the left, I'm not even sure that was born female. I'm seeing an interesting bulge. Then we got heavy. Then we have an ordinary-looking woman who looks probably okay. Then this next one is probably a woman, but huge. Next one is sort of ordinary. Next one, I think, is another dude. And anyway, I don't know what to make of all this, but I'm not convinced. Does this sell lingerie?
It looks like the stockholders have voted.
Yeah, the stockholders have voted, and I suspect that the profit margins have also weighed in. So I'm just looking at that and saying, what the heck does that sell?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm not even here to, I'm not a stockholder, so I don't have a say in this.
Yeah.
But sometimes I wonder, what does the board of directors meeting look like when the
something like that.
Isn't there anybody there screaming?
Who decides? That's a good ad. I mean, like I say, they always do these machines that they always advertise about getting fit and so on. Most of the time, the models that are models, men or women, that are on those machines don't look like you really need it. They look like they're they look like they're in pretty good shape already.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, but I guess that's a new philosophy. Then you want to get everybody involved, even people may be a little overweight. Mm-hmm. I certainly wouldn't want to have be a model. Put it that way. And
Don't worry, I don't think you're in any danger. Actually, I think I'd like to skip over our pictures now, and I have a rare video here. It's a video labeled 610. It was from Saturday Night Live, and it showed once.
Okay.
And I think we'll see why it showed once and only once. But it's great, and it's totally about media and media concentration.
Yeah. All right.
So if we get a chance, I'd love to run that, because I think it's some very good food for thought.
Okay, let's see it. Give it a second here, ladies and gentlemen. The technology is working.
Well, I didn't give the director a lot of warning, so
yeah, okay.
I'll take as much of the blame as necessary.
Yeah.
What's the time?
A lot of things on the Saturday Night Live, I think a lot of stuff is
number 610.
gets one showing.
Number 610, Mediaopoly.
Okay, we got it.
Mediaopoly. The whole media is controlled by a few corporations, thanks to deregulation by the FCC.
You mean Disney, Fox, Westinghouse, and good old GE?
They own networks from CBS to CNBC.
They can use them to say whatever they please and work down the opinions of anyone who disagrees.
Or stuff about PCBs.
What are PCBs?
They come from electric power plants built by Westinghouse and GE.
They can give you lots of cancer that can hurt your body.
But on network TV, you rarely hear anything bad about the nuclear industry.
Like when Westinghouse was sued for fraud.
Which time?
When GE made defective bolts, it was an unreported crime. Or when it was boycotted for operating nuclear bomb plants just to squeeze a dime.
That's a footnote, by the way.
A footnote protects you from folks who doubt what you say. Now maybe the voices in my head will go away.
But the big shots don't care. They're all sitting pretty thanks to corporate welfare.
What's that now?
They get billions in subsidies from the government. It's supposed to create jobs, but that's not how it's spent. They use tax soft money to support congressmen who hold over weapons programs again and again, and let them dump toxic waste where the young ones play.
I'll leave right down, this is good.
That shot JFK.
How far back does that go?
That was about 1997.
Wow, that's a long time ago. Yeah.
And yet what we were seeing, of course, was, GE was buying TV stations, and as they showed there, we have Disney bought ABC.
Yeah.
Westinghouse and GE were buying folks. Anyway, it was what you soon find, and it's no big surprise, is that the news stations stop covering things in a way that embarrasses their owners.
Yeah. But that was taken off the air right off the bat. That showed one time, right?
Yeah, it showed once.
Yeah.
That has not appeared in any reruns. It's rare to grab a hold of that. So I was amused enough that I thought I should show that.
Well, it's a good thing to say, because it compared now to what happens today. Stuff like that gets on the internet, and then of course it never dies. It's always that's when you got it off the internet. Basically, somebody picked it up somewhere and put it on the internet.
And it took a bit of hunting.
So you get to get on there and so on. But that again is their their opinion. In this case, Saturday Night Live was trying to do comedy, I assume, of some sort, so to make it funny and all that. But obviously somebody didn't think it was very funny, and they had the audacity to take it off, never show it again. But unfortunately, like I say, everything you do today goes into the cloud. You can't get away from it, and so on. I always like to tell people that I know of Facebook has a lot of a lot of computer stuff, a lot of data that they have to store. They have a farm. What do they call them? A farm of server stations. Servers.
Yeah, server farm.
Server farm in Sweden, above the Arctic Circle, very cold. It's about a mile square in the middle of nowhere in Sweden. Why? Because they save all that data. All that stuff that's been going through Facebook is saved basically. And those things get pretty hot, but of course you are in the Arctic, so that you can keep it done. And they're also next to a hydroelectric station, and they're going to build another one. Besides that one, they got to get another one now, and so on. All that data is out there. All that stuff is out there, and for us to see. It may very well you can approach us. In fact, maybe as a historical thing. That's obviously the animation and stuff like that not quite up to the standard that we have today, and that. But
it was quick and it was cheap.
It makes a point that it's making their point and so on, and they're entitled to do that. Quite honestly, I probably agree with some of the stuff that was in it. In fact, there's big banks.
Yeah, watch it again later.
Big pharma and stuff like that. I think that there is some of these companies. Well, I just gave advice to a kid I had some problems, not with, but he didn't really know how to do banking basically, and he got involved with a big bank whose name I'm not going to mention, and they closed his accounts, and they couldn't do anything at that point. A big bank, and my advice to him is go to a local. I guess this is an advertisement. Go to a local bank, a bank that's in your town with a few branches around and so on. That's the bank you really want to do your banking, because they know who you are, and they don't have 50 bureaucrats. We had to go to New York City in the seven-story tower that this bank has in downtown Manhattan, and talk to some people there on the 69th floor. To get this straightened out. Finally got it straightened out. It took 2 days to get it straightened out. And this poor kid, he couldn't get his own money out of the bank, and that's what he's now involved, because he was trying to pay his rent. Anyway, and I really wasn't involved. I really wasn't involved in it basically. Sorry, go ahead.
Since you mentioned how the internet remembers things, I think we should touch on video number 630, because Joe Biden has been telling us, well, I didn't tell immigrants to come, but roll tape, because as it turns out, yeah, he did.
Yeah, you've gone to some trouble to put this together, so let's see it. Mike?
First of all, the idea that Joe Biden said come, because I heard the other day that they're coming because they know I'm a nice guy. Sure, that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come. They're seeking asylum. First time ever we've told people they can't come to America. That ends. The cage is closed. Those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard.
Actually, he sounded pretty good in the late one, 2018. Now he gives speeches and so on. You're not quite sure if he knows where he is. That's another thing we could talk about at some other time and so on. This whole election is, as I said many times before, this is going to be very interesting. And that's really what it's all about. It's elections. People get to vote. They can be wrong. But they get a chance every 2 years to do it again. And that's exactly what they did. Look at the Obama. He got elected in 2008, and he lost the pluralities in both of the or majorities in both houses of Congress. But then 2 years later, he got reelected again. So that it wasn't too bad. Like this 2022 now, and that the Republicans lost all those seats and so on. Well, it's not this election, it's the next one. We're going to have another election. That's what we're doing. That if democracy is anything, it's elections. People decide to do certain things. They change their minds, as I just said, but they can change their minds all the time. My wife, bless her heart, was when she was alive, she never voted for the incumbent. That was her philosophy. If you
That was
didn't, if
actually
you
my
didn't make enough
father's.
money, but the first time around, you ain't going to get another chance with Doreen.
And my father said something similar, and he did it in 2 words. He said, ins, out.
Right, exactly, exactly. Anyway, and that's that's how people vote. That's how that. She was always kind of with the winner. I have to tell you that. I'm not sure what her party was, to be honest with you, because it's a secret ballot, of course. Well, it used to be a secret ballot, and it's not a secret ballot anymore. But mail-in ballot, by the way, just to throw this in, they've only got a minute here to say. The mail-in ballot, you get an envelope with a ballot in it, and then you have to add an envelope that comes in, so it has your name on it, there's a barcode on it, and you have to sign it. And then you put your ballot in that envelope, and that becomes your vote. That's not a secret ballot. They know who you are. Or they know exactly who you are. I mean, it would be pretty tough to have a guy opening the ballots and so on and say, "Oh, this guy's a Republican. We'll just toss that one out. We'll toss that ballot out. We know how he voted," and that
Yeah. These days, some of that stuff can be defeated at the envelope level just by shining a bright flashlight through it.
Yeah. Although it's changed now. Republicans, I've been involved in some politics in here and so on. They have now gone around and decided, well, if the Democrats are going to do it, we're going to do ballot harvesting too. So that's the nature of what's going to happen here. I know my brother always voted for my mother. She got an absentee ballot, and he filled it out, and she signed it. They're both not here anymore, of course, but so I can say that and so on. But she didn't really know how I voted, but it was pretty much a given. He voted. He would have voted the same way he did. Anyway, only got about a minute left here. Any more comments, Rob?
Yeah, some of the stuff I left out today involve, of all people, that great villain, Alex Jones.
Yeah, there's too much to know. Yeah.
I know, but I learned to like Alex Jones. The guy's a raving maniac, and he happens to be right. So I feel like some people don't like Trump style, but I listen to the actual things that he says, and I think, yeah, he was right again.
Who is this? Tim Jones? Who is
I
it?
said Alex Jones. Alex Jones has $1 billion judgment against him because of something or other that he said about the victims of some school shooting in New Jersey. I can't remember the.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, as soon as I think of the town's name, I can't imagine why I forgot. But anyway,
We only got
Alex
a few
Jones.
seconds left, Rob.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, look up Alex Jones on the internet. You'll be surprised. Have some fun.
Yeah, there you go. It's there. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again. It's been fun. I like my new white hat.
Yeah. Now I know you're a good guy.
Yeah,
Got a white hat.
that's my idea of dressing up. Put a new hat on.